Gather round, children. Today I'm going to read you a tale of Russian misery and woe. Once upon a time, Prince Mishkin was on a train. He came to St. Petersburg from Switzerland in the rain. His epilepsy left him in great pain. There he met Rogozin and Lebedev, whom he tried to speak to in vain. Interest in his plight, Rogozin did feign. They asked if he was coming from Spain. Mishkin replied that he was coming from a sanitarium because he was not quite sane. Mishkin was coming to stay with Lizaveta Yapanchin, his relative. He departed from the station so with them he could live. When he arrived, he saw that their house was massive. He stood outside, pensive. Then he went in, tentative. Miss Yapanchin took him in after he handed over her missive. The youngest daughter, Aglaya, was very attractive. She kept Prince Mishkin's eyes captive. General Yapanchin has a friend named Totsky. Years earlier, Totsky had a mistress named Anastasia, who hated him amply. He was willing to pay someone who, her, was willing to marry. General Yapanchin was willing to help by telling Ganya, his employee. Giving up his love, Aglaya would not go cheaply. Ganya would marry Anastasia for 75,000 rubles, a relatively small fee. When Prince Mishkin...
Are all Russian stories this long and boring?
Yes. It's part of their cultural identity.
Okay.
When Prince Mishkin arrived, it was Anastasia's birthday. It was the day Anastasia was supposed to announce whether she would marry Ganya and say yay or nay. Everyone thinks that Mishkin is no smarter than an ashtray. Prince Mishkin thinks that she looks more than okay. Yet on her face, her dismay was clearly on display. Prince Mishkin rents a room at Ganya's house. Mishkin meets Ganya's family, including his father, General Ivolgin, who is kind of a louse. He also meets the rest of the family, including the general's spouse. Anastasia shows up to see Ganya. His family didn't even like her enough to invite her in to eat lasagna. Then Rogozin shows up to pledge his love to her, enough to bring her 100,000 rubles and buy her a sauna. When the prince shows up at her birthday, Anastasia sees him as a truly good guy. She asks him whether or not she should marry Ganya, and he replied to tell Ganya goodbye. And she said, aye. Then Rogozin showed up with the money, not at all shy. Rogozin proposed marriage, and she did not deny. Mishkin also proposed, but she did not reply. She left the party with Rogozin, leaving poor old Mishkin there to cry. Before leaving, she threw the 100,000 rubles into the fireplace to taunt Ganya on that day in July. Anastasia ran between Rogozin and Mishkin for the next half year. Many con men prey on Mishkin and diminish his money, something severe. Tired of it all, she ran away from them both and did disappear. Rogozin and Mishkin hung out and exchanged crosses, sincere. Later that same day, a jealous Rogozin made an attempt to kill the prince with a knife. However, Mishkin had a seizure, which saved his life. Mishkin runs off to Pavlovsk after all that strife. There he meets Anastasia, the Volgins, and the Yapanchins, with whom the city was rife. A man named Burdovsky and his...
How much longer?
We're almost done.
Okay.
A man named Burdovsky and his crew came to town, claiming that he was the son of Mishkin's benefactor at the sanitarium, taking his idiocy on assumption. One of them, Hippolyta, was dying of consumption. Ganya proved that they were lying, but Mishkin decided to help them without any caution. He decided to offer Burdovsky the money and gave Hippolyta an offer of cohabitation. Mishkin is in love with Aglaya, he would come to decide. She liked him too, but was mean because her jealousy of Anastasia would coincide. At Prince Mishkin's birthday party, Hippolyta reads a really long suicide note before failing to shoot himself and commit suicide.
Is this appropriate for children?
Yes, it is. As your father. General Yapanchin starts viewing Mishkin as Aglaya's fiancé and one of them. They held a dinner with the other aristocracy to see whether they would approve or condemn. He breaks a vase, which causes a problem. He then had a seizure in which he sprayed his phlegm. Despite this, the aristocracy still thought he was sort of a gem. Aglaya announced that she had been getting the messages from Anastasia telling her to marry Mishkin, who she is desirous of. Mishkin was to meet them both and decide whom to love. He is torn between romantic love and pity love, which was to rise above. Anastasia falls to the floor. Mishkin offers her his glove. Aglaya is outraged and leaves after giving the prince a shove. Anastasia becomes engaged to Mishkin, the prince. However, Mishkin still clearly loves Aglaya, which made Anastasia wince. On the day of the wedding, Anastasia would run away with Rogozin to another province. Mishkin follows them the next day and searches the thorps for Rogozin and Anastasia. Rogozin finds him and brings him back to the house, where the truth he warps. Mishkin figures it out when he finds Anastasia's corpse. The police come the next day to find that Rogozin suffered from brain fever and Mishkin in a state of catatonia. In other words, not looking their best. Rogozin got sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in Siberia. I do attest.
I'm gonna cry.
Shh, there. Mishkin was sent back to the sanitarium at his own behest. Aglaya marries a rich exiled Polish count, who turns out not to be wealthy, nor a count, nor an exile. He couldn't even afford a vest. He leaves Aglaya to go on a personal quest. Miss Yapenchen comes to visit the ailing prince and cries over his body when she sees him with such little rest. Thus our tale comes to a crest and shall end despite much protest.
Why did Prince Mishkin betroth himself to Anastasia instead of Aglaya?
Well, child, it is because he pitied Anastasia and thought that he wasn't worth marrying Aglaya. So his view of himself was lesser.
Why do they all have silly names?
Because they're Russians.
Why is it entitled The Idiot?
Because Prince Mishkin is naive, and was one of the reasons he was sentenced to the sanitarium was because he had what they called idiocy. So he was dumber than the rest of us.
What does thorps mean?
Thorps is like a village, or a hamlet.
Is it one or many?
It is a plurality of hamlets.
Why did Rigatoni killed Anastasia?
Well, he killed her out of a jealous rage that it was on her wedding day with Mishkin, and they ran away together and then got into a fight over Prince Mishkin, in which he pulled out a knife and stabbed her multiple times.
Can we read a happy story tomorrow?
Yes. Come back tomorrow for one of those happy Finnish stories.
Good night.
Good night, children.